Trump, the truth teller. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Now, I'm sure it was just a bizarre coincidence. So when Donald Trump arrives at the UN today before his big speech, stuff mysteriously just stopped working, including the teleprompter and the escalator. Of course, among such a humorless bunch as the UN crowd, President Trump was not about to let a laugh line slip by.
All I got from the United Nations was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle. If the First Lady wasn't in great shape, she would have fallen. But she's in great shape. We're both in good shape. We both stood. And then a teleprompter that didn't work. These are the two things I got from the United Nations, a bad escalator and a bad teleprompter. Thank you very much.
Now, when the UN General Assembly meets, we usually hear speeches filled with tedious cliches and meaningless niceties. Things like, we must preserve and strengthen the global community, or we must confront the challenge of climate change, or we must resist the impulse of isolationism and protectionism. You've heard it all before. But Donald Trump actually came to the UN to deliver a message. Wake up, start living in the real world, or lose everything. Because in the real world, oil and gas rule. Nuclear energy is clean and safe. And solar and wind are ugly stepchildren in the energy family.
If you don't get away from this green scam, your country is going to fail. And I'm really good at predicting things. I've been right about everything. And I'm telling you that if you don't get away from the green energy scam, your country is going to fail. At extreme cost and expense, Europe reduced its own carbon footprint by 37%. Think of that. Congratulations, Europe. Great job. You cost yourself a lot of jobs, a lot of factories closed, but you reduced the carbon footprint.
Yeah, well, it may be a little braggadocious of him today, but it also happens to be pretty accurate. As Europe clings to failed socialist and progressive policies, Trump's been right about issues across the board. He said he'd get NATO countries to pay more for their own defense, and he has. He vowed to fight relentless lawfare back at home and win, and he did. He said you don't need Congress to close the border, and he did it without Congress. He said imposing tariffs would bring nations to the table and money into our treasury, and they did. Those are just a few. I could go on all night. It would be actually kind of fun to do that. Look, our allies may not want to hear it, but in their hearts, they know that they invited waves of Islamic refugees into their countries, and it's had a profoundly negative effect. And Trump got into all of this today. On that issue, Trump and Republicans are extremely popular in the United States. And of course, today, Trump didn't mince words.
The number one political issue of our time, the crisis of uncontrolled migration. Your countries are being ruined. The United Nations is funding an assault on Western countries and their borders. It's time to end the failed experiment of open borders.
Of course, an anti-immigration political movement is sweeping through Europe now, from Sweden to the UK to Germany. More politicians than ever are saying enough. We've had enough. So is it too late? Trump said no, not if you get serious really fast. But most of all today, I think Trump reminded everyone that he's the real peacemaker in the room, perhaps the most peace-obsessed president America has ever seen. But what about the UN?
It's too bad that I had to do these things instead of the United Nations doing them. And sadly, in all cases, the United Nations did not even try to help in any of them. I ended 7 wars, dealt with the leaders of each and every one of these countries, and never even received a phone call from the United Nations offering to help in finalizing the deal.
This was the tough love that the UN needed to hear.
What is the purpose of the United Nations? The UN has such tremendous potential, but it's not even coming close to living up to that potential. For the most part, at least for now, all they seem to do is write a really strongly worded letter and then never follow that letter up. It's empty words, and empty words don't solve war.
But what about all the media outlets and the Democrat hacks who've spent years painting Trump as Putin's puppet? But who's really been bailing out Putin in Ukraine?
China and India are the primary funders of the ongoing war by continuing to purchase Russian oil. But inexcusably, even NATO countries have not cut off much Russian energy and Russian energy products, which, as you know, I found out about 2 weeks ago, and I wasn't happy.
Well, he's 100% correct. The Angle's been talking about this for years, literally years. China is the big dog here, and India's second. If both of those countries weren't buying Russian oil and Russian ag, Russia would have folded in Ukraine long ago. That is the truth. And Trump also made an appeal to the Russian people themselves. It was very smart. This speech was a masterstroke, but the cerebrally challenged over at CNN, I don't think they have the capacity to see how pivotal it was.
This was not a normal UN speech. We could say that with confidence. It read and sounded more like a MAGA stump speech than a speech to the assembled world. He attacked the UN itself. He took credit for great reductions in migration into this country, and then he said to U.S. allies in Europe, your countries are going to hell. He attacked not just renewable energy, but climate science. He said, listen, I'm always right.
And the pylon continued all day long because on MSNBC, to those characters, which covered for Biden and lied about Russia collusion for years, they think telling the truth is mean.
I am not surprised the president did what he did. What I am surprised by is that the nations, the leaders of the world, still show up to listen to what he has to say. And I wonder now if they show up because it's the sort of the global equivalent of going to a stand-up comedy show.
Yeah, stand-up comedy show? Oh, really? Because last time I checked, all these countries that were forced to listen to Trump, they're not laughing when they burn up the White House phone lines to literally beg for trade deals. Well, you heard Trump's truth. Now here's the Angle's truth. The UN becomes more irrelevant every day because it cares more about bashing the United States than it does about building a better world. But President Trump has made it clear he's willing to work with the UN. Heck, he's willing to work with anyone to create more peace and prosperity for all. But the rest of the world has to understand that Americans will no longer be treated as fools or as suckers. That era is over. America is on the rise. The rest of the world can either work with us or be left behind. And that's the Angle.
Daddy's not happy. He came to the UN today, and it was a total mess. Everything was broken. The escalators weren't even working. Trump and Melania were riding it up, and it just stopped. The First Lady lost her balance a bit, but steadied herself, thankfully, and then marched to the top. She could have been hurt. And the president looked over at the press and knew something was up. At first, we thought the escalator just malfunctioned, but then so did the teleprompter.
I don't mind making this speech without a teleprompter because the teleprompter is not working. I feel very happy to be up here with you nevertheless, and that way you speak more from the heart. I can only say that whoever's operating this teleprompter is in big trouble.
Trump says the UN is just lucky that Melania is in great shape.
All I got from the United Nations was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle. If the First Lady wasn't in great shape, she would have fallen. But she's in great shape. We're both in good shape. We both stood. And then a teleprompter that didn't work. These are the two things I got from the United Nations, a bad escalator and a bad teleprompter. Thank you very much. And by the way, it's working now. It just went on. Thank you. I think I should just do it the other way. It's easier.
Coincidence or sabotage? The UN tried to blame Trump. But on Sunday, the Times reported this, quote, to mark Trump's arrival, UN staff members have joked that they may turn off the escalators and elevators and simply tell him they ran out of money. so he has to walk up the stairs. The White House says this isn't a joke and is demanding an investigation. They could have hurt the most beautiful First Lady in American history. Why are we paying for a building that's just trying to injure the First Lady? If anything, it made the UN look bad, not Trump. The UN covered up for the China virus and then didn't stop the Iranian nuke program. We did. They're not making peace. So what are they doing? I visited the UN over 10 years ago. It's still the same.
What has the UN accomplished recently?
I don't know. Maybe it's the.
Do you ever just cut loose and go hit the restaurants afterwards and just tie one on?
You're in New York. What else would you do after the meeting?
What's the cuisine like in Nepal?
Cuisine means
The food.
food.
Yeah.
Food. Food. Rice and
Are you trying to stay out of trouble here in New York? Have you found romance here in New York?
romance. To you?
Romance.
Romance.
With the ladies? Striking out? Things will pick up.
The UN's just a slush fund for lazy diplomats. Trump's trying to help them, and they're trying to embarrass him.
What is the purpose of the United Nations? The UN has such tremendous potential. I've always said it. It has such tremendous, tremendous potential, but it's not even coming close to living up to that potential. For the most part, at least for now, all they seem to do is write a really strongly worded letter and then never follow that letter up. It's empty words, and empty words don't solve war. The only thing that solves war and wars is action.
We haven't heard much about the UN since the Iraq War. What have they been doing for the last 20 years, besides whining about climate change? Trump's Mr. Ceasefire, and the UN never even picked up the phone.
In a period of just 7 months, I have ended 7 unendable wars. It's too bad that I had to do these things instead of the United Nations doing them. And sadly, in all cases, the United Nations did not even try to help in any of them. I ended 7 wars, dealt with the leaders of each and every one of these countries, and never even received a phone call from the United Nations offering to help in finalizing the deal.
Harry Truman created the United Nations after World War II to help maintain peace and stop war. They're not doing that. All they're doing is funding invasions.
Not only is the UN not solving the problems it should, too often, it's actually creating new problems for us to solve. The best example is the #1 political issue of our time, the crisis of uncontrolled migration. The UN is supposed to stop invasions, not create them and not finance them. We have reasserted that America belongs to the American people, and I encourage all countries to take their own stand in defense of their citizens as well. You have to do that because I see it. I'm not mentioning names. I see it, and I can call every single one of them out. You're destroying your countries.
The UN unleashes refugees, then blames it on global warming so it can ask America for more money. That's the scam. And Biden was in on it. He kept our border open and then gave the UN $1 billion to stop global warming. The Europeans are in the same boat as the big guy.
Europe is in serious trouble. They've been invaded by a force of illegal aliens like nobody's ever seen before. Illegal aliens are pouring into Europe. Nobody's doing anything to change it, to get them out. It's not sustainable. And because they choose to be politically correct, they're doing just absolutely nothing about it.
My producer went to Portugal. I know, we pay him very well. And said it was 2 hours at customs because there were plane loads of Muslim refugees with their whole families. They don't speak English or Portuguese or Spanish or even French. And the Portuguese officials were trying to fingerprint them, and all hell broke loose. And at the end, they were like, all right, just go right in. My producer's mom talked to the customs official, who was livid and said, yeah, there are plane loads of these people who are coming in all day, every day, and we just have to let them in. You see them on boats racing onto the shore in France. If we don't protect the birthplace of Western civilization, we're finished. How long can we go before Europe ceases to exist? Cities across the world are turning into little Jalalabads.
I look at London, where you have a terrible mayor, terrible, terrible mayor. And it's been so changed, so changed. Now they want to go to Sharia law. But you're in a different country. You can't do that.
The UN's been telling us it doesn't matter because, we're all going to die.
The executive director of the United Nations Environmental Program predicted that by the year 2000, climate change would cause a global catastrophe. He said that it will be irreversible, as any nuclear holocaust would be. This is what they said at the United Nations. What happened? Here we are. All of these predictions made by the United Nations and many others, often for bad reasons, were wrong. They were made by stupid people that have cost their countries fortunes.
The world hasn't ended, but they did end fossil fuels. Everybody went green and then went, oops, this doesn't work. Germany went full Al Gore with windmills and solar panels. They paid China billions for it. It was such a disaster, they went back to buying Russian oil. China laughed their way to the bank. They had the green market cornered and robbed the West blind. And to make it worse, unvetted foreigners are sucking up the rest of the resources. Trump said, I told you so.
It's time to end the failed experiment of open borders. You have to end it now. See, I can tell you. I'm really good at this stuff. Your countries are going to hell. If you don't get away from this green scam, your country is going to fail. And I'm really good at predicting things, you know. They actually said during the campaign, they had a hat, the best-selling hat. Trump was right about everything. And I don't say that in a braggadocious way, but it's true. I've been right about everything.
We're handing the world the MAGA model. Stop the green stuff, close the borders, and make money, not war. It worked here, and it'll work there. You have a choice. Kill your culture and your currency, or use a little common sense. Then everybody can get a job, get married, have babies, go to church, and go on vacation, and give a little back. And if everybody can get their own houses in order, we don't have to police the world and be the bad guy. That's what they say they want, right? Biden used to come in and to the UN and say it was all about autocracy versus democracy. And the intelligentsia would nod their heads and stroke their chins. Well, all that means nothing if you can't keep your lights on and control your borders. Half the time, Biden didn't even know where he was.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Welcome to Washington. Fellow leaders, friends, for 944 days, Putin has waged his vicious onslaught against Ukraine.
Welcome to Washington. The first Trump term, the UN rolled its eyes. Now Trump's back. He was right about everything, and they're forced to take him seriously. European officials say, quote, none of this is amusing anymore. Nor do the other leaders still believe they can manage Trump. They're still trying, but he's shown an unpredictability this time that no amount of compliments and gifts is going to change. Everybody knows who has the power. The president of France, Emmanuel Macron, had his motorcade halted because Trump was just hanging out around the block. And 47 told him to go for a walk.
I'm sorry, I'm the president. I'm really sorry. It's just that everything's in frozen right now. There's a motorcade coming right. I'm sorry.
If you don't see, let me pause. How are you? Guess what? I'm waiting in the street because everything is puzzled for you.
Leaders around the world are calling Trump daddy, nominating him for the Nobel Peace Prize and flying to Mar-a-Lago for rounds of golf. Trump even got Zelenskyy to put on a suit at the White House and at the UN. A big shift is happening. Fox News alert. Trump thinks Zelenskyy has it in him to beat Putin. Quote, I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form. with time, patience, and the financial support of Europe and, in particular, NATO. This is a huge change in posture for the president. Clearly unhappy with Putin's lackadaisical attitude towards peace, Trump just threw the car in drive and is suggesting that the United States, Ukraine, and NATO fully fund the campaign to push Putin completely back to the previous borders, no matter how long it takes. He called Putin weak.
It could be that Russia's a paper tiger. I don't know what they are, but 3.5 years of fighting and killing everybody, of killing 7,000 people a week for nothing, So it's a very sad situation, but most of you have seen the recent statement I put out a little while ago, and I'm glad you got it. But I feel that way. I really do feel that way. Let them get their land back.
Is this just a negotiating tactic, or does Trump mean it? We're about to find out. The ball's in Putin's court. And Trump says the next Russian plane that enters NATO airspace is getting shot out of the sky.
Mr. President, do you think that NATO countries should shoot down Russian aircraft if they enter their airspace?
Yes, I do.
This is a new era. Biden's gone, the UN's feckless, and Trump's giving the world the playbook, the MAGA model. And Putin's on notice. If the Charlie Kirk assassination taught us anything, it's to be clear, bold, and unafraid. We're trying to help other countries. We're giving them billions of dollars. We're sending them arms, energy, and tech. We're trying to stop the killing. We're trying to talk sense into you. But if you're going to fly planes into airspace and send refugees across our borders and sabotage our teleprompters and escalators, while we're trying to help you, we're going to blind you with the light and expose you, here and everywhere.
And welcome to Hannity. And tonight, breaking news from former Vice President Kamala Harris. This is entertaining. She just confirmed something we've been telling you on the show for months and months. Jasmine Crockett is the future of the Democratic Party. Take a look.
You describe in the book something that you called a secret project that you ran as vice president, that you called the STARS Project, identifying up-and-coming talent in the Democratic Party. You'd meet with them, ask them about their interests. You say that more than one of them said they felt like they were being called to the principal's office when you asked them to come in. But the folks who you met with in this way include some of the people who you see very frequently now on MSNBC: Jasmine Crockett, Angela Also-Brooks, Maxwell Frost, Robert Garcia Moore.
Run, Jasmine, run. That's all I can say. We have a lot more on that coming up. Just a small sampling from the first 24 hours of Kamala's amazing book tour. It's going about as well as you would expect. We have full coverage of that, all the lowlights that will entertain you. But first, tonight, the Trump doctrine, a warning for the world, and frankly, a death knell for globalism. President Trump addressing the UN General Assembly earlier today, and he did not hold back. It was no holds barred. Nothing was off limits. No country was off limits. No person was off limits. The UN was not off limits. Anyone had any doubts that Donald Trump is the leader of the free world? That illusion was shattered today. It's almost as if those gathered at the UN might have been worried, might have known what Trump was probably going to do, and that means go after them, because there were a lot of roadblocks in the president's way this morning as he headed to deliver a message to the delegates that they were not exactly looking forward to. The escalator leading to the chamber stopped the moment the president and the first lady, if you look at this, stepped onto it. And when Trump made it onto the stage, the teleprompter, that wasn't working either. And Trump recalled the episode in his speech. Take a look.
All I got from the United Nations was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle. If the First Lady wasn't in great shape, she would have fallen. But she's in great shape. We're both in good shape. We both stood. And then a teleprompter that didn't work. These are the two things I got from the United Nations: a bad escalator and a bad teleprompter. Thank you very much. And by the way, it's working now. It just went on. Thank you. I think I should just do it the other way. It's easier.
The UN with a history of globalism, virulent anti-Semitism, anti-Americanism, and now a broken teleprompter and escalator. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt pointed out the Times newspaper reported this weekend that UN staffers had actually contemplated turning off the escalators to embarrass Donald Trump. The UN now says the escalator stoppage was triggered by someone running it up it too quickly before the Trumps. I'm not sure I buy it. Now, given the security and safety implications here, the UN should investigate further, and maybe they should be absolutely sure. Look, there's no other way to say it. President Trump called out the UN directly to their face. Again, historically anti-Semitic, anti-American, pro-globalist, everything. And by the way, he should. In 2023, we gave the UN some $13 billion taxpayer dollars, about 25% of their entire budget, and 75% of that contribution was voluntary. What do we have to show for it? A broken escalator, a broken teleprompter, and a world broken by war and a useless institution that pushes globalism. But the president was undeterred by the setbacks, proceeded to deliver what I actually believe was the best speech on the world stage I've ever seen him give. It was deep, it was impactful, it was profound. He spared no one from his truth-telling, friend or foe alike. He challenged every single globalist institution, starting with the UN itself for their failures and outdated way of thinking. He laid out a new vision for the world. President Trump uniquely understands that the power, the might, and the purpose of this country, the United States of America, must be used as a force for good, and that's exactly what he is doing. Now, that goal requires the cooperation or the fear of other nations, especially our friends and our allies, and he is using both effectively. They should not be economically supporting our enemies, and the president reminded them of all that today. Take a look.
Inexcusably, even NATO countries have not cut off much Russian energy and Russian energy products, which, as you know, I found out about 2 weeks ago, and I wasn't happy. Think of it. They're funding the war against themselves. Who the hell ever heard of that one? I mean, you're much closer to this. We have an ocean in between. You're right there. And Europe has to step it up. They can't be doing what they're doing. They're buying oil and gas from Russia while they're fighting Russia. It's embarrassing to them, and it was very embarrassing to them when I found out about it, I can tell you that.
How stupid. You know, Western Europe funding Putin's war machine. Now, the president did not leave Europe alone after that. He had a very dire warning for our allies in the Western world. The end is near for your societies if you don't change course and change course fast. Take a look at his admonition.
Europe, on the other hand, has a long way to go, with many countries being on the brink of destruction because of the green energy agenda. I'm telling you that if you don't get away from the green energy scam, your country is going to fail. Not only is the UN not solving the problems it should, too often, it's actually creating new problems for us to solve. The best example is the #1 political issue of our time, the crisis of uncontrolled migration. It's uncontrolled. Your countries are being ruined. The United Nations is funding an assault on Western countries and their borders.
Couldn't be more correct. And later in the day, President Trump even got the opportunity to face the French President Emmanuel Macron directly with his displeasure over France recognizing a Palestinian state. Watch this encounter.
Well, I think it honors Hamas, and you can't do that because of October 7th. You just can't do that. But we want our hostages back, and we don't want them back in, ones and twos and take the next 2 years to do it.
But the president did not only call out our friends, he had plenty to say about our adversaries as well. Early in his address, he reminded the world about how he handled the long-running threat of Iran's pursuit of nuclear weapons. Peace first, always. But if negotiations falter, a time does come to use the unrivaled strength of the United States military. Take a look.
The world's #1 sponsor of terror can never be allowed to possess the most dangerous weapon. That's why, shortly after taking office, I sent the so-called Supreme Leader a letter making a generous offer. I extended a pledge of full cooperation in exchange for a suspension of Iran's nuclear program. The regime's answer was to continue their constant threats to their neighbors and U.S. interests throughout the region. Today, many of Iran's former military commanders, in fact, I can say almost all of them, are no longer with us. They're dead. And 3 months ago, in Operation Midnight Hammer, 7 American B-2 bombers dropped the 14 30,000-pound each bombs on Iran's key nuclear facilities, totally obliterating everything.
Also, the president reminding the entire world of the 7 conflicts that he helped to end around the world, even ones that he had, that they had gone on for 30-plus years, on for decades. Take a look at what he said.
In a period of just 7 months, I have ended 7 unendable wars. They said they were unendable. You're never going to get them solved. In all cases, they were raging with countless thousands of people being killed. This includes Cambodia and Thailand, Kosovo and Serbia, the Congo and Rwanda, a vicious, violent war that was, Pakistan and India, Israel and Iran, Egypt and Ethiopia, and Armenia and Azerbaijan. It included all of them. No president or prime minister, and for that matter, no other country has ever done anything close to that. It's too bad that I had to do these things instead of the United Nations doing them. And sadly, in all cases, the United Nations did not even try to help in any of them.
No, they didn't. They're pretty useless. Now, after patiently offering Russia and Putin an off-ramp to war and to death, President Trump is now giving Russia the Iranian treatment. Now, here's what he said today after the speech about repeated Russian incursions on NATO airspace. Listen to this.
Do you think that NATO countries should shoot down Russian aircraft if they enter their airspace?
Yes, I do.
And in a Truth Social post this afternoon, President Trump encouraging Ukraine and Europe to take the fight to Russia and announced that the U.S. will continue selling arms to NATO, which NATO can then give to Ukraine. He called Russia a paper tiger that should have won this war in 3 weeks. The world is now on notice. President Trump is a crusader for peace, but he will not hesitate to use the awesome might of this country for a force for good. And by the way, after they push him to the limit, he's trying hard for peace. And after a full day of diplomacy in New York today, President Trump will return to Washington and turn his attention to domestic matters like the government funding deadline approaching at the end of the month. This morning, the president canceled a meeting with Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, telling them that he will not be held hostage by their insane demands, which include things like over $1 trillion in new spending for health care for illegals, taxpayer-funded gender swap surgeries for minors, open borders, men and women's sports. All the Democrats have to do is vote to pass a clean funding extension. Right now, they are the ones moving our government towards a shutdown, which is odd, because in the past, they have been quite outspoken about how bad shutdowns are for America. In case you've forgotten, here's a reminder.
It is not normal to shut down the government when we don't get what we want.
If the government shuts down, it will be average Americans who suffer most. A government shutdown means seniors who rely on Social Security could be thrown into chaos.
Families will be hurt. Farmers will be hurt.
It's the service members who will work without a paycheck. It's the firefighters who will be furloughed.
This shutdown, you know who's going to feel the pain? You know who it hurts? You. Everyday people and the most vulnerable. Seniors, veterans, working families, hungry kids, y'all.
Democrats are signaling they're ready for a fight. This time, Schumer tells the Associated Press, quote, things have changed.
It is not normal to shut down the government when we don't get what we want.
You just love the Washington swamp. Surprise, surprise. Democrats playing politics again. President Trump presented a bold new vision for America in the world today at the UN. They want no part of it. They would rather just wallow in their own hatred. Shocker.
I know why you're clapping. Because of me. Happy Tuesday, everyone. So Kamala Harris appeared on The View today. It took her 10 minutes before she realized it wasn't Animal Planet. She was hawking her new book, where in it she claims when she heard Joe drop out of the race, she was in a room with Joe and two of his closest aides. Yeah, hearing and home medical. Earlier today, President Trump addressed the UN General Assembly. Things got off to an awkward start, though, when he had the first 4 rows deported. During his address, Trump questioned why the UN even exists. Well, sorry, Mr. Trump, the UN week serves a very important purpose, creating hundreds of jobs for the city's hookers. Yeah. It's their holiday season. Keeps them in the black till the next UN week. French President Macron had to get out and walk after police blocked traffic for Trump's motorcade. Macron said he wasn't worried about getting assaulted because he was nowhere near his wife. So good. Perfect. Later tonight, Jimmy Kimmel will return after he was taken off the air. I know. Yeah, and here I thought America had a strict policy against torture. But it's further proof that you can't keep a good black man down. Yeah, it's him. The ladies of The View chimed in about Kimmel, saying, "No one silences us," which is why they play loud music when they're using the bathroom. Noisy bunch. Howard Stern announced he canceled his Disney Plus to protest the suspension of Kimmel. Wow, Disney's never going to get that $9.99 back. So brave. I'm not sure why Stern said it on the air. He could have just called his remaining listener and told him directly. And finally, one of the last surviving actors who played a munchkin in The Wizard of Oz has died at the age of 94. I think we have a picture. All right. So NBC claims that investigators have found no link between Charlie Kirk's assassin and any left-wing groups. Of course, these are the same people who see no link between the size of Brian Stelter's ass and Reese's peanut butter cups. As for this narrative's timing, all you have to see are the responses, which is, see everyone, no left-wing group was involved in this murder. Well, congrats, NBC, you provided the cover. And you can add that to your other scoops. The laptop is fake, COVID came from bat soup, Trump colluded with Russia, Joe is sharp as a tack. The mainstream media misses more mayhem than a blind cleaning lady at Motel 6. So is it a relief to know that the assassin wasn't part of some radical group? That he was just some guy who acted upon a daily reminder that in order to save democracy, you had to murder someone? True, there were no records of him showing up at the nightly Antifa potluck at the YMCA. He didn't need to. Every single day he was fed the message that all of us are Nazis, fascists, white supremacists. From colleges to comedy shows, you can't escape the brainwash. So the media says, good news, folks, he wasn't radicalized by a group. Yeah, because he was radicalized by you, the media, the constant drumbeat from Democrats, the press, activists who've been screaming for years that people like Charlie aren't just wrong, they're evil. Who needs an armed group having a clandestine meeting in a basement when you have nightly programming on MSNBC? They have more blood on their hands than Jeffrey Dahmer after a first date. I know. Never a second date with him. But if you're thrilled there was no organized group behind this hate, then how do you explain the reaction after the assassination? It wasn't universal horror. No, you had thousands of ghouls cheering his demise. Pop stars, talking heads, teachers, bureaucrats. Antifa wasn't needed because the culture did the work for them. Saying no left-wing group was involved doesn't mean there's no left-wing influence. It means the poison has seeped into the groundwater. You don't need a special club when the entire ecosystem is the club. It's like Charles Manson bragging that he didn't kill anybody himself personally. No, Charlie, it wasn't you, just a gaggle of human scum that you brainwashed. Nope, these creeps gave motive, permission, and the hopes that Kirk's assassin would be seen as a hero. Meanwhile, the same fools now cite bogus studies that say political violence comes from the right. But the stats are less believable than the shoe polish on Jesse's bald spot. Because once you dig into the data, it turns out the fact checkers are about as clean as Hunter Biden's urine. They pad the numbers, twist definitions, and ignore every incident that doesn't fit the script. When the once vaunted Economist magazine cited a study showing that the most political violence is right-wing, they failed to mention that the study by an outfit called the Prosecution Project was run by a self-proclaimed Antifa member. That's like letting Dana lead a study on the advantages of living in a snow globe. And yet the media devoured this fan fiction like it was objective data, coming up with a bogus study to smear the right and laundering it through the media. Rinse and repeat. So you got to wonder, why lie? Why did Jimmy Kimmel blame MAGA for Kirk's death? It wasn't just bad timing. It helped provide cover for future left-wing violence. So don't tell me no group. The group is CNN. The group is Hollywood. The group are the late-night hosts losing millions but still propped up by the networks. The group is every politician who calls half the country Nazis. And they're shocked when some unhinged loser happens to believe them. If you can't see that, it means you're part of that group too. Let's welcome tonight's guest. When he performs, even the crickets have a 2-drink minimum. Writer and comedian Joe DeVito. This Federalist founder fillets liberals like flounder. CEO and co-founder of the Federalist, Sean Davis. Like Shakespeare, she's best at creating drama. New York Times bestselling author and Fox News contributor, Kat Tiff. And that wasn't an eclipse on Sunday. He just stood up to stretch. New York Times bestselling author, comedian, and former NWA world champion. So, Joe, do you think it's a relief to know there was no connection between organized groups and the murderer, that it was just the entire culture?
Yeah, I wonder where else you see this. They're calling people Nazis. Where are they getting this from? From watching reruns of Hogan's Heroes that everybody's a Nazi?
Yeah.
It's so absurd, and like you said, they're saying like, oh, we've just exonerated ourselves.
Yes.
It reminds me of some studies I saw about terrorist attacks, and they said the study started on October of 2001.
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, there was kind of a big event the month before that.
Right.
That you've now moved the goal lines on this. So it shows you that they have to create this problem. That's why the Kimmel quote was so bad, because he said, of course this guy's MAGA. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't an opinion. In their minds, something bad happens, it has to be something bad happening from that side.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to create this problem, and they'll never be satisfied. Look at Don Lemon was complaining about the wonderful ceremony that they had for Charlie Kirk, and he said, "Oh, it's like religious intolerance." Like, no one is making you do anything, Don Lemon.
Yeah.
Let alone, no one's certainly making you go into work.
Yeah.
Nobody's making you do that. They have his picture at the gates at CNN, make sure he doesn't come in and rob the vending machine. So it shows you they are the radical left-wing group.
Yeah, that's so true. You know, Sean, your publication, The Federalist, is the one that debunked all of these studies saying that it was right-wing violence. If you hadn't done that, I think we'd still be hearing about those studies.
I think we will. I think we're going to hear about them anyway. When you were introducing it, the reason I knew that you were about to say something that wasn't true is that it started with NBC News claims.
Yes.
And I think the reason they do this is they have this cognitive dissonance on one hand, and then on the other hand, I think they actually feel deep shame. Mm-hmm. I think they know what they're doing is wrong. They know it's a lie. And instead of just repenting and asking for forgiveness and telling the truth, they cover their own shame and lies because they feel so bad about it. Deep down, they know they're responsible for it, and they just can't handle it.
Yeah, that's why they rationalize everything. Because if you admit you're wrong, then what else are you wrong about? Everything. It's about your whole filter. Hi, Kat.
Hey.
How you doing?
Not great, honestly.
Really? What's up?
You know, I see this stuff and it like, look, this might be controversial and maybe people will, whatever. I have to be honest. I am at the point in my political analysis career where I'm starting to think that the Amish have a lot of really good points.
Yeah.
I do. It's like the amount of hate and manipulation that I would not see if I didn't have to look at the internet every day.
Yeah.
I'm like, put me on the carriage, keep me pregnant, I'll churn the out of some butter, let's go. I know, to be clear, I'm not sure I really mean that.
Well,
I'm
no,
not sure I really
I
mean
know
that
a guy, Kat.
I don't think I have the upper body strength for churning the butter. I'm pretty sure I'd be kicked out of Amish very quickly. But it stuff can really make you hopeless when you see a horrible tragedy and then you see people whose first thought is, how can I make sure to not just not, have my side be at fault, but look at the other side and how they're all at fault. And then I'll look at the internet and then my dumb ass will keep looking at the internet, looking for something that makes me feel better, and the longer you look, the worse you feel. Something I've started doing is making sure the first thing I see every morning, I don't look at my phone. The first thing I see every morning is I go wake my son up, and I see him smiling at me.
Yeah.
That is what life is about. That is, I think that if we want to have any hope as a society, I think that we need to encourage people to just, even if it's for a little bit, just to turn this stuff off, tune it out, and go spend time with your family.
Yeah. No, I do the exact same thing you do. I wake up in the morning and then I drive to your apartment.
To look at my baby.
Yeah. And I climb up the side of your building and I stare at your baby until Cam comes around and hits me with a rake.
Yeah, we got a good thing going.
Yeah. It's all just my way of getting Cam to hit me with a rake. Tyrus, last word to you. What do you make of this?
Cap might be onto something with this Amish thing.
Yeah.
I got the beard for it.
Yeah.
How do they feel about mixing? Are they cool with that? Like if I promise to build, not, what was the other thing? Pregnate all the Amish women? If I just focus on building stuff and they let me have an ox, I'm in.
Yes.
You might already be Amish.
Yeah, I don't know if I can. I think it might be, I don't know. Black thing, I don't know. He is exactly who their verbiage is for. So, of course, he doesn't belong to anything. He's not a part of anything. These individuals that listen to their words, that's their whole point. They don't belong to anything. So they hold on to something. And then when they get an opportunity to be a part of the world, in his case, he had a relationship, and based off the text messages, it was pretty one-sided. So he thought this massive thing he was doing for his partner was going to somehow change things because he was believed in the things that he was hearing. It's always going to be a lost person.
Yeah, that's true.
They don't belong to anything they want to. So they connect themselves to the extremes because those are the only groups that will return their emails. Those are the only chat groups that will listen to what they have to say. You created these poor bastards with your mission because there's one mission. Everyone keeps talking about why don't the Democrats have policies and this? They don't. The extreme left that's taken over the Democratic Party have one mission: end Donald Trump. They're too far deep. They're not going to change, and they'll just keep going and continuing these things because we've said it a million times in this show. If you say someone's Hitler long enough, you're going to have martyrs come out of the woodworks, and it's always these lost souls. So great journalism that you figured out he had no real connections to anything. No, that's why he went out and shot somebody in cold blood.
He was like, president of the Rotary Club.
He had a vibrant social network.
Yes, exactly.
Because if he belonged to a group, they would have talked him out of it.
Yes, that is so true. That's why suicide bombers, there's only just one in a car.
Yep.
Yeah, they don't really carpool for that.
Yeah, they don't go like, let me try to get somebody else. All right, old joke.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.